Lord with our children. And when we got out to Golden, Eddie had the most awful, I didn't know it at the time, but it was asthma from the driving out there with the ragweed and all. And so when we arrived there, we had to get antiphagistine for his chest and spread all that stuff over on his back, and well, he got over that. And your father could hardly wait to get us in the car and take us up Lookout Mountain. And we had such a nice house there, a beautiful house. And we were right at the foot of Lookout Mountain. And Guggenheim Hall was right across from us. And every time we'd make a bend, we'd get higher, and we'd be close to the edge. Catherine would make a squeal. She couldn't stand it. We were getting so high. And your father said, "Don't do that again. Don't do that anymore." So she sat there, and every time she'd go around this bend, she'd go, whew. Then we'd go around another one, whew. We went up the mountain with Catherine saying, whew. Poor little girl. And it was worse coming down the mountain.
Did she go all the way down?
She went down all the mountain, but she didn't squeal anymore. Oh dear. And we had a barn at the back of our house, and it had the doors that would open where they had put hay for the, I guess, bales of hay up there, and a pulley to pull them up there. And we had, by that time, we had Arlie that was a cross, a Cherokee Indian, and an Irish father.
Where'd she come from?
She came from Oklahoma.
Yeah, but how'd you happen to get her out in Colorado?
Somebody called me and said, we've got to, the Depression had set in by that time, and nobody had any money. Nobody could buy anything. The banks had closed. We had paid our rent by check, and Mr. whatever his name was that owned the house had failed to cash the check when the money was in the bank. So the bank closed, and here he was holding the check, and they wouldn't give him any money. So fortunately the Army was kept being paid, but at a lower rate. They had cut our pay. Am I talking too loud?
No, fine.
So Pop had to pay a second time, but I don't believe he paid actually twice, because I think he destroyed the first check. I hope he did, because we didn't have any money either. But anyway, Arlie came to us as a live-in maid, and she had never worn shoes. And she was as Indian looking as you can imagine, but a strong, fine looking woman. And she just loved my children, and she helped me very much, and she learned very quickly. And she was left in charge of you children when we went over to Fort Logan for something in the afternoon. And when we came back, she said, there's something wrong with Happy. The children were playing out in the barn, and they told Happy to hold on to this rope while they pulled him up to the hayloft. And so he got almost up there, and then he let go, and he fell down. Well, you had a concussion yourself. So, fortunately, it didn't last too long, but Eddie was pulling you up by this rope, and you let go. He was going to pull you into the hayloft. Oh, dear me. And then April Fool's Day came along, and you all knew it was the 1st of April, and you never trusted your father. And you had a little room right at the end of our bedroom by yourself, and Eddie had a front bedroom, and Catherine had a back one, and Arlie had her own room. We all had bedrooms. It was wonderful to spread out. And Louis looked out the window, and the Mines football team had brought in some little burros, and I think they had a polo game out, and they were riding burros around. Well, during the night, one of them got off the tether that they had down there near the field, and he came up to our yard, and we had quite a large yard. And Pop said, "Happy, look out the window. There's a little donkey out here." And Happy said, "Oh, I know, April Fool. Can't fool me. Happy, come here and look, there's a little donkey out here." "Uh-uh. No, sir. I know you." "Happy, you better look." And you couldn't hold it in any longer. You really had to go and peek out the window, and there was a little donkey. So your father went in to Eddie, and Catherine woke them up and said, "Look out the window, there's a donkey out here." "I can't fool us." Nobody would look out the window. And even Ollie wouldn't look out the window. And when they did that, they couldn't believe their eyes. We had a donkey. It was adorable. Now let's see, what else happened out there? Oh, we went skiing, but there wasn't enough snow. And I can remember seeing your father going down this slope, and there were boulders all around, but it was snow. He hit one of these rocks, and he went head first right straight on down the mountain. Not too far, but at least he left his skis behind. But there wasn't any snow to make a track.
Yeah. Well, I remember when they used to have initiations there of the fraternities.
Yeah.
And then they used to have
Can you be heard on this?
oh yeah, yeah, and then they used to have a day in which the freshmen used to get even with the upperclassmen and throw eggs
And what did they do?
threw eggs at them and
Threw eggs?
oh, and
I didn't see any
they
of
had
that.
tug of war in the mud.
Well, I knew they had tug of war, but
It was a whole day.
I didn't see it, but you saw it.
It was the same day that they would go up and paint the M on the mountain, whitewash the M.
Yeah, And the opposing team, some other college would come up to try to stop them, and they'd
Right.
have a battle up on the mountainside. And then you used to go over to Guggenheim Hall and sit on the ledge of the basement windows. And down below they had some classrooms in what do you call
Geology.
geology. And all the students thought you were pretty cute. And you were only 5, and you had a little wagon.
Second reel of the of this tape. There's two reels of tape that we've taken here. And we're just talking about right now Golden, Colorado.
Golden, Colorado.
Right.
When your father was PMS&T, is that what you call it?
Yeah.
He was the PMS&T officer in charge of
ROTC.
ROTC.
Right.
So you were going over every morning when they had classes down in the basement of Guggenheim Hall, and sit out on the stone coping and look in at the students, and you were their mascot because they thought you were pretty cute. And then somebody would hand you a rock because you were collecting stones. You had a collection of stones. So they were handing you specimens that were down there in the classroom. And you would put the rock in your little red wagon and bring it home for your collection. And then the next morning you'd go over there and somebody would give you another specimen. You had very nice collection.
Well, I understand.
Geological.
I understand. I used to participate in the questions as to what the various minerals were. From
Yes.
the professor.
You knew what galena was, and you knew what the names of some of these things that I didn't know anything about. But one day, the professor came to your father and said, I think that my students have been giving your little son our specimens, and we'd have to have them back. So Pop didn't know anything about it, neither did I. So we had to collect all these very good specimens and give them back to the professor. So we stopped collecting stones there. But I think they gave you some agate that you could keep for yourself, and I think you still have it. And after was there anything else?
Well, what about
Anything else in
what
Golden?
What about Eddie and Catherine there in Golden? What were
Well,
some of the things that they were doing?
behind our house, we had clay pits. The Coors people made very good pottery out there, and they got their clay from the pits that were beyond our house, and they were narrow trenches wide enough to leap across and get to the other side, but just able to. They were very dangerous. And that was off limits to all you children. You could not go over where the clay pits were, because it was just a maze of them. And they were very deep. And I came back, Pop and I guess I came back alone. And I found that you and Happy, I don't think Catherine was there, had been out there jumping over the clay pits. And so I took a little switch and I switched your legs. And from that time on, they always told me, would bring it up to me, how I had brutalized you.
Horsewhipped us.
What? I horsewhipped you. It was a little lariat that I had. It was given to me as a child, and it went with a pony cart, a real pony cart. And it was a little rattan switch, and it had little knots in it, all down. So instead of a switch from a tree, I had that little lariat, and I used it on your legs because I had to impress on you the fact that you could never go over in the clay pits. But you never let me forget it. You never let me forget that I horsewhipped you. I just beat you up. And it just killed me. Arlie didn't like it either. She didn't like me using that little switch on you. But you never went back to the clay pits again.
Whatever happened to the little switch?
We were going out to Fort Mason?
Where? Fort Scott?
Fort Scott. Mason was down the Presidio one.
Mm-hmm.
We were going out in our Ford, and Arlie was in the Ford with us. We went out with Maud Gates in one car, and I had the little switch with me, and Arlie didn't like that switch. And along the road to California, she threw it out the window, and that's where my little lariat went. And it was a beautiful little handmade lariat. So when we got out there at Fort Scott, and Louis was aide to General Cheney, we had such nice quarters. And you were in kindergarten, so you had all the afternoon off, and everybody else, except a couple of your friends, all the other children were in school. And one day, we had a row of garages behind us, and everybody had his own garage and his own padlock. And that day, you and your friends, I don't know whether there were 2 or 3 of you or 4, but you went along and you collected all the padlocks that were just hanging on the door, and the cars were out, that the officers had gone to work. But you took all the padlocks off and had them in a basket or a bag. And then you went back and closed the doors and hooked the padlocks on the doors. But you didn't remember which padlocks went to which doors. And that afternoon, after work, the men came back and nobody could get in their garages. And they were ready to, they were all steamed up. Nobody could get their cars in the garage. They didn't know what had happened. So that night, at midnight, the chaplain came in. He was the only one that hadn't gone over to the office to try to find out what key went to what padlock. Because everybody had to go over and turn in their keys, go over there and turn in the keys, and then they had to sort out the keys. But the chaplain came in at midnight, and it was deep fog. The fog had rolled in, and he couldn't open his garage, and he was steaming hot. I don't know what he did until daylight, but he didn't get in his garage. But I think you were given they called all you little boys. How many of them were there? Do you remember? You don't remember this? They called you all over to the office and lined you up, and they really read the law out to you. They didn't do anything else to you, but they really told you off. You didn't try to do it. You were just collecting padlocks. And then when you were through, you hung them back on the doors. But you didn't do it intentionally to lock out the officers, but you really did cause havoc.
Well, there's another story about those garages there.
Yes, you had to break
president.
some windows if you wanted to belong
Eddie was
to a
president.
certain club.
Eddie was president of the club, and Catherine was vice president.
And the more windows you broke, the higher up you were in the organization. And I don't know, one of them had 27 windows because they were small panes, but they called a little pane a window. But I think there were 27 that they broke. That was an initiation into this club. And you broke quite a few yourself.
Well, Eddie broke the most because he was president.
What?
Eddie broke the most.
Yeah, Eddie broke the most. 20. He broke the most.
And Catherine broke the next because she was vice president.
I think so. And then one time, Arlie was living with us. She went back there with us. We had gone in town, and something upset Eddie very badly. He was very mad at you. You and Eddie had the room together, and he threatened to jump out the window. Do you remember that?
Yep.
And he got halfway out the window, or all the way out. Catherine said he got all the way out and was hanging on by his hands when Arlie came down and got him in. And that was... But I think that Eddie was smarter than that. I think he had his arms pretty well inside the house so that he wasn't going to let go. But I know that Catherine nearly had heart failure. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
Do you remember how, were you frightened?
Well, he was hanging there by his hands.
I know it. Well, they told us about it when we got home. And let's see what else happened out there.
Well, Arlie left them.
Well, Arlie was so good by that time that a bachelor dentist got her away from me, offered her so much money as a housekeeper that I couldn't keep her any longer. And I understood her desire to better herself, but it certainly killed me to lose Arlie. And she was very sad about leaving, too. But Arlie went and kept house for this dentist. And then Arlie married one of the sergeants there, which was quite a step up for somebody who had never worn shoes when they came to me. And so she had a home of her own by that time, and they were transferred to Panama, and I got a letter from her, and she'd had a baby, and she named the baby Helen. And I thought that was such a nice thing to have a baby named for myself.
Did you ever hear from her?
Yes, I heard after Eddie died, she wrote me a letter, and she was very illiterate. It was, I can't tell you how illiterate her writing was. You didn't notice so much when she talked, but when she tried to write, she could not write grammatically. But she wanted, she was grieving for Eddie. So it was very sweet of her to write me. And then after that, I never heard any more. Because I went to Germany and things, I don't know what happened to Ollie. But she was certainly a wonderful woman, really a wonderful woman. And she dearly loved you children. So then from Fort Scott, can you think of anything that you did at Fort Scott that was interesting?
Well, I remember Eddie
We used to go over to my mother's in Berkeley, and my mother and father's, and they would come to us at Christmas time. Well, what you remember? What, Eddie?
He had a magazine route.
Oh,
He used to sell.
I think it was Saturday
Evening
Evening Post.
Yeah.
Eddie would deliver all right, but he would never collect. He just would not collect the money. He couldn't get anybody to pay him for his magazines, and your father would have to go around with him. And what else?
I used to go around with him.
And you
Deliver.
And by that time we had Duke, the red setter.
Where did he come from?
He came from the neighbors right next door who were transferred, and they didn't have any place to take. What was that setter's name?
Duke.
Duke. So they asked us if we wanted Duke, and we did. We took Duke, and he was so sweet. He was just lovely. We had a cat too, and the cat was named Farina. And the way we got Farina was you caught a serious cold, and it left you with rheumatic fever. You had a rheumatic heart. And the doctor said that you had to stay for, I don't know how many months it was, or weeks, in your room, on your bed. Keep him as quiet as we could. So my mother said, I'm going to get Happy a kitten. I know a person who has a cat that has really beautiful kittens. So I went over to Berkeley and I got this little black kitten, little male kitten, and we call him Farina, after the little boy in our gang. And that cat stayed with you night and day in your room, and you tumbled with it, you wrestled with it, and it just adored you. And you would roll over and over with the cat in your arms on your bed. You played with it all day, and he just adored you. When your father came home at lunchtime, he would meet your father at the door. He had gotten large by that time. And he would stretch his paws up as high on your father's knees, legs, as he could, and your father would pick him up and put him like a lady's stole around his shoulders and the back, and then go all around the house with him, and he just loved your father. And at night, when he was a kitten, before he was that big, and you would have your bath at night, he would get up on the side of the bathtub, and do you want me to tell you this?
Yeah.
And with the water running, he would dip down and play with the water with his paw. And then you would watch, and I don't know whether you helped him, but pretty soon he would fall into the tub, and then you'd think that was the greatest joke on earth. Farina in the bathtub. And then one time, in order to get onto the bathtub edge, he had to jump onto the toilet seat and the top was down, and then from the toilet seat he would step over onto the edge of the bathtub. So one time you didn't put the top down on the toilet, and he wanted to get up to the bathtub. You were in the bath water, and he jumped right in the toilet. And that was another joke. That was an awful funny joke. Farina in the toilet. Now what else?
Well, we left.
Oh, you were in kindergarten, and you were Pocahontas. You were Hiawatha, and I have pictures of you as Hiawatha because you were the star with your Indian feathers and all. And you had to sing a little song about Wah-wah-tassie, little firefly. Do you remember that?
Let me light you with my candle.
Oh, that was delicious. I thought that was out with me.
Sure, sure.
I don't like the food.